Welcome to Category Visionaries, the show dedicated to exploring exciting visions for the future from the founders who are on the front lines building it. In each episode, we'll speak with a visionary founder who's building a new category or reimagining an existing one. We'll learn about the problem they solve, how their technology works, and unpack their vision for the future. I'm your host, Brett Stapper, CEO of Frontlines Media. Now let's dive right into today's episode. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Category Visionaries. Today we're speaking with Yariv Bash, CEO and co-founder of Flytrex, a drone delivery platform that's raised $60 million in funding. Yariv, how are you?
Hi, Brett. Great to be on the show. Doing good so far.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm super excited to have you, and I'm really excited to talk about everything you're building at Flytrex, but I'd be a fool to skip right into Flytrex without asking about your previous company. So go ahead and tell us about the easy problems your previous company was trying to solve.
Yeah, so before doing drones, I was actually doing spacecraft. I co-founded and was the CEO of a not-for-profit called SpaceIL, as in Space Israel. And we actually built and launched the first private mission to the moon, an unmanned mission, but that was the first of its kind. It was an amazing project, took almost a decade, and it was really out of this world to lead such a thing.
And I see you had founded that back in 2010. What were you doing in your life to be sitting there in 2010 to say, yep, I think I can pull this off. I can start a nonprofit and I can get us to the moon?
Well, I am Israeli. That helps a lot. And I'm also an electronics engineer. So I'd say when I looked at the problem, back then we were part of the Google Lunar X Prize competition. And I heard about the competition. I'm actually now at a friend's house where I first heard about that competition back in 2010. And I thought to myself, well, if the US did it back in the 60s, the Apollo mission and the Surveyor mission, the unmanned Surveyor mission prior to that, then I'm pretty sure we can do it in the 21st century for a lot less. And that's how we got started.
I interview a lot of Israeli founders, and I always ask them about their time in military service and, what their big takeaways are. And consistently what I've heard from, probably asking, 40 or 50 Israeli founders that question is they say it's implanted in their mind that anything is possible and you can truly do anything that you put your mind to and work really hard at. It sounds like that's the case for you as well. You're willing to tackle these problems or businesses or opportunities that, to an average person just sound completely insane and impossible.
I tend to agree, but there's another side to that. It's in Israel, failure is not considered something that bad. So you don't have to be afraid of failure. That's okay to fail. And I think that's the other side of that, to have great ambitions. It's important, but it's also, if you're not afraid of failures and you'll be okay and you'll be treated not as a failure, that helps a lot to tackle big problems.
I mean, the sky's the limit. That feels like a cheesy pun here in the case of drone delivery and space, but it works. We can say that. The sky's the limit.
For sure.
And then what was the outcome of that? So I know there was a launch. Can you talk to us what's launch day like? Take us behind the scenes.
So that was back in 2019. It was a crazy event. I mean, we had the Prime Minister of Israel at the mission control, hundreds of people we had. So SpaceIL is actually a not-for-profit, an educational not-for-profit. Everything we raised is donations. As the co-founder, I have zero equity, as it's a Israeli equivalent of a 501c3. And it was just mind-blowing. And as an educational not-for-profit, from day one, what we always said was that we want to make sure that every kid in Israel hears about the project and feels part of it. So on launch day, we had hundreds of locations all over Israel where kids could come and take part in the celebration. It was an amazing event. A month after that, roughly, we had the landing event. It took us about a month to get to the moon, part of keeping it an affordable budget. And we ended up landing a bit too fast. Instead of roughly 10 miles per second, we ended up landing at roughly 2,000 miles per second. So we made a lot of kids cry that evening. That was the thing. All the kids are now waiting for us to build a second spacecraft and make it this time. So we turned it into a dramatic series rather than just a single event. So you can say that it might be even a bigger impact on the next generation of kids.
When's the next rocket launch?
Wow, that's going to take 2 to 3 years. We're planning something even bigger. So we're going to have an orbiter around the moon, and then that orbiter or satellite is going to release 2 landers. So, if we crash the first time, we can correct whatever happened and then crash for the second time for a different reason or, maybe even succeed.
I'm going to invite myself to come to Israel and watch that launch. Growing up, my dad was an engineer for NASA. And, when I was a little kid, he used to come and pull us out of school whenever there was a rocket launch,
Wow.
we could go and watch it. So I want to come see this one whenever that moment does happen.
I never saw a rocket launch. When we launched with SpaceX, I was in mission control in Israel. So never had the chance to watch a rocket launch. Pretty sure I'll get to that.
Someday, someday. Well, let's talk about what you're building today and the drone delivery business. So, what made you want to go into the drone delivery business?
Well, when I started Space IL, the moonshot, I had another friend and we shared an apartment in Tel Aviv. And after a few years, we started dating two medical students. Today, we're married to two physicians. And my friend Amit had one of the largest mobile application development companies. And after a few years, I got tired of the day-to-day operations in Space IL, and he got tired of running his company. And he basically started playing with drones. We're talking about 2013 or so, like the early days of drones a decade ago. And, he told me, listen, I'm starting to play with drones. Well, let's try to do something together. I'll do the software, you'll do the hardware. And basically, what we've built was a small black box for consumer drones. You attach it to your drone, we connect to the data bus of the drone, and then we transmit all the data in real time to our servers. Back then, this was before the amazing consumer drones that we have today. Back then, drones didn't connect to your cellular phone. So we had like real time data from the drone, where it's at, GPS, battery levels, and we had a website where you can collect all of your flights and receive medals like Strava and compete with friends, those kind of things. And we didn't raise any money the first 2 years. We bootstrapped the entire thing. We ended up making close to $1 million in revenues in 2 years. We had a network of 90 dealers in 70 countries. It was a really nice business, a small one, but a nice one. And then at the end of 2015, the beginning of 2016, we realized that one, if you're doing consumer electronics, you better speak Mandarin and sit in Shenzhen. Otherwise, you're going to be, left out of business. And that DJI, the Chinese drone manufacturer, running like crazy, and they're going to have products that will kill ours in a matter of months. And then we started looking for the next killer application when it comes to drones. And we thought that with drone deliveries, that could be a really interesting business. It's going to take a while. It's a marathon rather than a sprint, but we realized that for us, that's the opportunity to pursue. And we started raising funds and started doing drone deliveries.
This show is brought to you by Frontlines Media, a podcast production studio that helps B2B founders launch, manage, and grow their own podcast. Now, if you're a founder, you may be thinking, I don't have time to host a podcast. I've got a company to build. Well, that's exactly what we built our service to do. You show up and host, and we handle literally everything else. To set up a call to discuss launching your own podcast, visit frontlines.io/podcast. Now, back to today's episode. From a regulatory perspective, maybe let's just focus on the US. What types of regulatory hurdles do you have to jump through for this to be something that, any consumer in a town can use?
Yeah, so as you can imagine, due to the lack of drones flying above your head as we're speaking, there are still some regulatory hurdles. I'd say that the last hurdles are being removed these days after a very lengthy process of multiple companies with the FAA, and it should take multiple years. I mean, the skies are so safe today. General aviation, commercial aviation is so safe, and it's really important to keep it that way. So the FAA is investing a lot of effort and a lot of time in incorporating commercial drone activities, but they have to keep the safety level. So it's taking some time. But I'm happy to say that we're really at the end of the process. And I expect next year you'll start seeing a lot more drones flying above your head.
Whenever I hear about this idea of drone deliveries, in my mind, I just think like, I can't imagine it. Like my brain just can't comprehend what it would look like if there were drones flying across the skies. But then I have to like remind myself that, maybe my grandparents or, however far back we go, they were first talking about this idea of planes. That probably sounded insane. Or even cars probably sounded insane at one
The
point.
internet.
It's hard to wrap your head around. So with drone deliveries, like what is that going to look like? Are they going to have like flight paths and they're all going to be flying kind of, on these like air roads, or what is that going to look like?
Well, there's a nice saying that the future is already here. It's just not geographically spread in an equal way.
Hmm.
And if you fly to Holly Springs outside of Raleigh-Durham in North Carolina, or to Little Elm in the suburbs of Dallas in Texas, you'll see thousands of deliveries every month. That's just Flytrex. There are a few other companies doing the same thing. And in those towns, the future is already there. People are ordering Chick-fil-A and Little Caesars and Jersey Mike's using our system and drones every day throughout the day, and it just works.
And what's the flight path look like for them? Is it just getting, to the destination as quickly as possible, kind of as what's the saying, as the crow flies? Or is it following like dedicated paths?
Oh no, totally. It's just we want to take the shortest route
Hmm.
to reach you as fast as we can, so the fries will stay crisp and the hamburger will be hot and the ice cream wouldn't melt. Plus, energy-wise, you want to keep it as short as possible. So it's usually pretty straight lines from our stations or the restaurants all the way to your house.
Yeah, we're Americans. We need our burgers to be hot.
Everybody needs their burgers to be hot, and everybody wants to pay less for that and get it faster. That's our job.
From a cost perspective, how does it compare to like Uber Eats or DoorDash? I'm guessing it's more expensive today, or is that unfair assumption to make?
I'd say that's actually tackling a very important point.
Mhm.
When you're ordering something with DoorDash, usually the courier does not arrive in a shiny new BMW because you need the right vehicle and the right system to reach the right unit economy.
Hmm.
And it's the same with drone deliveries. Not all drone deliveries are the same. You can have the equivalent of a BMW, but for a burrito delivery, you kind of need the equivalent of an e-bike. And it's even harder to make that into reality because on one hand, we're certifying a commercial airplane with the FAA. On the other hand, that commercial airplane has to fly for just a few dollars per mission. So there's a huge difference between doing an MVP, a minimal viable product, to building a system that's commercially viable. You're not competing with other drone companies. You're competing with a DoorDasher that drives a 15 years old car in the suburbs of North Carolina. That's your real competition. And we've been focused on doing that for more than 6 years now. And we've built an amazing system. It's not just the drone. The drone is just a small part of the entire system that enables us to give you a better service for a lot less than the traditional on-demand services. It's a win-win for everybody. The restaurants, the customers, just across the board.
For this whole ecosystem, I'm guessing that has to be built out. Or if we just look at the merchant side, the restaurant side, what changes do they need to make, internally to prepare for this? And one of the companies, or I always walk by Sweet Green. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Sweet
Mhm.
Green, but I walk by them every day on my way to walk the dog, and they have an entire restaurant essentially that's just completely blocked out just for Uber Eats and DoorDash delivery, and they have a big amount of real estate just meant for that. What type of real estate do they need to add on, or what types of processes or workflows do they need to build out in order to be able to deliver on their end as a merchant?
So part of designing a system that's meant for restaurants, we've made sure that they don't have to change a thing. They can continue working as they do today. We take care of the rest. If they're servicing DoorDash and Uber Eats, they can start working with Flytrex tomorrow. And we've signed more than a dozen national restaurant chains across the US, and we're signing more. I don't want them to change a thing. Otherwise, it's a complex business, and restaurateurs have enough on their heads. They don't need to understand their own deliveries as well.
This show is brought to you by the Global Talent Co., a marketing leader's best friend in these times of budget cuts and efficient growth. We help marketing leaders find, hire, vet, and manage amazing marketing talent for 50 to 70% less than their US and European counterparts. To book a free consultation, visit globaltalent.co.
How does that work though? Does the drone come to the parking lot and then the employee runs it out? Or how do they actually go from the merchant to the drone, which eventually goes on to the consumer?
So we have a few options. Basically, if the restaurant offers a curbside pickup, our drone just arrives, lowers the hook. We never land near a restaurant or a customer, the hook on a tether.
Hmm.
And then all the restaurant employee has to do is go outside of the restaurant, and instead of doing curbside pickup to a car, just put the package on the hook and the drone takes it from there. If they're not doing curbside pickup or they don't want to, we can charge a bit more. And then we have a runner, our own employee, who just goes into the restaurant, picks up the order, and loads it on the hook outside, and then goes to the next restaurant. So he's 10 times or 20 times more efficient than someone who has to drive to your house.
Got it. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And in that case, that runner, are they independent contractors? Are they full-time
No,
employees?
no. So that's the nice thing with drone deliveries. We have enough margins, so we can have, part-time employees with health benefits and everything. It's a different game.
Okay, so you're not going to run into all those headaches that the DoorDash and the Uber Eats of the world have had to face.
If you look at that market, it's crazy. Those companies are worth dozens of billions of dollars, and they're barely making any money. They're optimizing for fractions of cents. And, the market already there. I mean, everybody uses those services, so they can't really optimize it anymore if they continue using humans. And the costs are only going higher. The cost of those 1099 employees, of having a car, owning a car. Different states have now different regulations for those 1099 employees. So the only path forward is a leap forward with technology and robotics.
I know you had mentioned there that you've signed up, I believe it was a dozen national restaurant chains. Is that the focus is, more on the enterprise side, or is it going to be SMBs and mid-market? Like, how are you thinking about it just from a persona perspective?
Oh, so we love onboarding everybody. The more deliveries I make per restaurant, per station, the more restaurants I have signed up, the better it is for everybody, because that way the cost per delivery goes down. So when we open a station in a shopping center, like a street mall in the suburbs, we sign up everybody who wants to join the service. And usually it's almost everybody. Mom and pop restaurants, restaurant chains, whoever's there.
From a marketing perspective, is that difficult that you're targeting, enterprise and then targeting SMBs? Like, does the message change, or is the message the exact same regardless of the size of the business or company or organization that you're selling to?
More affordable deliveries, faster service. You don't have to meet anyone. It's spot on every time because it's robotics. So your food always gets to you hot and on time. It's the same value proposition no matter if you're a national chain or a local restaurant.
If you think ahead to the next 12 months, what are your top priorities for the next 12 months?
As we'll receive the last big regulatory approval we need to start scaling, I think that in the next 12 months, we'll start opening more locations across the US. We love opening hubs. So currently we have 2 stations outside of Dallas and 2 stations outside of Raleigh-Durham. We're going to open more stations in those areas. And as we go, we'll open more hubs across the US.
From a fundraising perspective, I mentioned there in the intro, you've raised over 60 million to date. What have you learned about fundraising throughout this journey?
Wow. So I've learned that every dollar you don't spend is a dollar you don't have to raise. And every dollar you do raise, if you want to make it into $50 next month, that's really hard. So you have to be as nimble on budget as much as you can, because as a startup, you're usually more optimistic than you'd like to admit. So you're usually not on time. So you have to make sure that you don't run out of money. And with drone deliveries, this is a marathon rather than a sprint. You have to pace your run, don't burn too much money, because things might take longer than you expect. Then you might end up with bingo fuel or zero fuel. So that's, I'd say, the biggest thing that both Amit, my co-founder, and myself are busy with. Throttling our expenses while competing with companies that have raised in the billions.
How do you compete with companies that have raised in the billions? What's the approach? Being an underdog, obviously, I think has some advantages and some obvious disadvantages, but how do you think about that just from a competition perspective?
I think that at the end, Flytrex is a logistical company, and logistic companies are nimble and extremely lean. And that's a culture you must have from day one. If you raise $1 billion, you're going to burn $1 billion. And that's not going to make you, you can't be lean if you do that. And in the long term, the leaner and more nimble companies will win.
Final question for you before we wrap up here. Let's zoom out 3 to 5 years into the future. What's the big picture vision look like?
Oh, wow. Thousands of stations across the US doing millions and tens of millions of deliveries every day. People using us not just for food, but for retail. I can send you a t-shirt. If you don't like it, the drone will just take it back. Your next iPhone, an iPhone charger, whatever you want from a shopping center, we can deliver it. It's near your house, except maybe for large screen TVs. For that, you'll have to order online and wait for the next day or drive physically to the nearest retail shop. But besides that, 90% of what a shopping center has, we can probably deliver to your house in less than 10 minutes.
Amazing. I love it. I love the vision. And this has made me excited about the future. I feel like just in general, the last year, it's been such an exciting time in tech. ChatGPT is obviously here. That's, changed even just the basics of how you Google search. I'm in San Francisco here, so I take Waymo everywhere now. And that still blows my mind when they get into self-driving cars. Like, it really just feels like we're making our way towards the future that we've been promised for so long. And I just love speaking with founders like yourself and builders like yourself who are really building that future. So really appreciate you taking the time. This has been a lot of fun, and wish you the best of luck in executing on this vision.
Thank you, Brett. It's been my pleasure. And if people want to follow us up, then, we're on LinkedIn and Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever is your favorite platform, we're on it.
Amazing. Well, thank you again. Really appreciate it. This episode of Category Visionaries is brought to you by Frontlines Media, Silicon Valley's leading podcast production studio. If you're a B2B founder looking for help launching and growing your own podcast, visit frontlines.io/podcast. And for the latest episode, search for Category Visionaries on your podcast platform of choice. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.